Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into one of the toughest nuts to crack in education, the achievement gap. And we're going to look at a pretty radical solution, one that works in a way that, honestly, nobody saw coming.
So let's just get right to it. Here's the big question. Can something as extreme as having kids live at school actually fix educational inequality? It sounds like a moonshot, right? But the data gives us some really specific and, frankly, surprising answers. Okay, so first things first, we gotta really get our heads around the problem. This achievement gap. It's not just some buzzword you hear on the news. It's a real, stubborn problem that for decades we've thrown everything at, and it just hasn't budged much.
And, it's really important to get this. This isn't just a US problem, or a problem in any one country. It's global. From North America all the way to Asia, you see these same kinds of deep-rooted gaps in education. They wear different clothes, so to speak. So let's look at two examples. On one hand, you have the US, where there's this persistent, well-documented achievement gap between Black and white students. The national data is pretty clear on that. Then you jump over to China, and you see a different flavor of the same problem. The big divide there is between urban and rural students. It's all because of this thing called the hukou system. It's basically a household registration that locks you into your hometown, meaning if you're from a rural area, you can't just move to the city and get into their better schools. So you've got two totally different countries, two different reasons, but the result? Same story, a massive gap in opportunity. So with all the usual fixes not quite cutting it, some researchers took a big step back. They started asking a much bigger, more radical question. What if the problem isn't just the 8 hours a day a kid spends in school? What if it's their entire environment, 24/7? And that's where this idea of the urban boarding school comes in. Now, what is that? Well, it's a mix of two powerful ideas. First, you have a really structured, no-excuses style of teaching. Think high expectations, strict discipline, total focus on academics. Then, you combine that with a full-on boarding program. We're talking students living at the school from Sunday night all the way through Friday afternoon. They are completely immersed. The thinking behind this is actually pretty simple. The hope is that if you can take a student out of a home life that might be unstable or just full of distractions and put them into a safe, super structured academic environment, well, you give them a real shot. You're maximizing their study time and just surrounding them with support. Now, obviously, this is a huge undertaking. It's intense, it's all-consuming, and yeah, it's really expensive. So the billion-dollar question is, does it even work? And let me tell you, this is where the data gets really interesting. Okay, so our first big piece of evidence comes from these places called seed schools in the US. They got so popular that they had more applicants than spots, so they had to use a random lottery to decide who got in. Now, for researchers, this is the holy grail. It's a perfect natural experiment, right? It lets you compare the kids who won the lottery and got in to the kids who lost and didn't. That way you can measure the school's real impact. And the results? Wow, they're just wild. For every single year a student went to a seed school, their reading scores shot up by 0.211 standard deviations. Okay, standard deviation sounds super technical, I know, but just think of it like this. In the world of education research, an impact of 0.1 standard deviations is considered pretty good. Anything over 0.2 is like a home run. So this isn't just a tiny improvement, it's a massive, massive leap in reading skills. And it's the same incredible story for math. In fact, the jump is even bigger, almost 0.23 standard deviations every year. I really want to stress this. These are not the tiny incremental gains you usually see from a new program. In education, numbers like these are game changers. We're talking about fundamentally altering a kid's entire academic path.
So let's put that in real-world terms. What does a gain that big actually mean? It means a student making this kind of progress could completely wipe out the entire national Black-white achievement gap in just 4 years. 4 years! That's just a stunning idea to even think about.
All right, so right now you might be thinking, okay, that's one school in the US. Maybe it's just a one-off, a fluke. Fair enough. But it's not. Let's travel across the globe to China, a totally different country, a different system, and guess what? A huge study there found a very, very similar pattern. So in China, this huge survey found the exact same thing. Living at school was tied to better academic scores. And here's the key part. Just like in the US study, the kids who benefited the most were the ones facing the biggest disadvantages. In this case, it was the students with a rural hukou. And a big reason why seems pretty simple. It just freed them up from distractions and having to do a lot of chores at home. It gave them more time to actually be students.
So, okay, we have evidence from two different continents, both pointing to the same thing. This immersive boarding school model can get incredible results. But if we dig just a little bit deeper into that US data, there's a twist. And it's a twist so huge, it basically changes the entire story. Yeah, for whom do these schools work best? This is the question that takes this from just an interesting finding to something that could be, well, revolutionary. Because it turns out these massive gains are not spread out evenly. Not at all. Just look at this. This chart breaks down those huge academic gains from the SEED study by gender. And honestly, it's one of the most jaw-dropping things I've ever seen in this kind of research. For the girls, the academic gains are gigantic. They're off the charts. And for the boys, the gains are, well, they're basically zero. Statistically, you can't even tell they're there.
And just in case you think I'm overstating it, listen to what the researchers themselves said. They wrote, and I'm quoting here, "Taken literally, the point estimates imply that our findings are driven entirely by the female lottery applicants." Let that sink in. The entire effect is from the girls. It's just an incredible finding. For girls, this super structured immersive environment is like a rocket ship to academic success. For boys, it doesn't seem to move the needle at all. So what we have here is an intervention that looks like a silver bullet, but specifically for disadvantaged girls. Which brings us to the last really practical piece of this puzzle. What does this kind of success actually cost? Yeah, the price tag. As you'd probably guess, it's pretty steep. Running a SEED school costs about $40,000 per student per year. To put that in perspective for you, that's almost double what the local public school district spends. That's a whole lot of money, which leads to the big, obvious question. Is it worth it? Well, the data suggests maybe we should think of it less as a cost and more like an investment. See, that extra $19,000 a year pays off down the road. Economists have projected that based on these kinds of academic gains, these students are going to have higher lifetime earnings. And for society as a whole, you get big drops in crime and even better health outcomes. So when you add it all up, the benefits to everyone could actually be way bigger than the initial price tag. And that brings us to a final, pretty provocative thought. The data we've looked at shows a really powerful model that can actually close these deep, stubborn achievement gaps, whether we're talking about disadvantaged students in the US or rural students in China. But, and this is the huge but, it also shows that this intense 24/7 environment works almost exclusively for girls. So the question we have to leave you with is this. If we're actually serious about tackling educational inequality, should the future of reform be laser-focused on creating all-girls boarding schools? The data doesn't just hint at it, it pretty much screams the question at us.